Oh my god, I'm so excited for today's video because I get to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is hate to love romances. Okay, so today's video is completely a 7 on Sunday topic, and today is the day that we're meant to be uploading this topic, but I'm not actually making this 7 on Sunday video because I've actually had plans to do a hate to love romance recommendations video for a while, but I was just too busy to do it. So when this topic came up, I'm like, oh beauty, I can put 2 videos in one. But I actually have 9 recommendations and then quite a lot of other books that I just want to mention about, which I'll explain about later in the video. So this is definitely not a 7 on Sunday video for me because I'm going to be talking about like 15 different books. So even though I am joining in with everyone for this topic today, I'm technically still not a part of the 7 on Sunday crew today, but I am excited to do this recommendations video. This is one of my favorite tropes. I always talk about this trope. I'm always looking for books that have this trope, and I also haven't read a book that has this trope for quite a long time, which saddens me. I'm definitely gonna have a lot to talk about because it's my favorite thing ever. Okay, the first book I absolutely have to recommend is Well Met by Jen DeLuca, and I know it feels really random for me to have an adult contemporary being one of my first recommendations, but this book was amazing, and it is literally the full structure of what you want hate to love to be. So our main characters are Emily and Simon, and they are completely different people, and from the minute they meet each other they do not hit it off well, and they don't like to be around each other because she doesn't really get the whole fair thing, but the fair thing is so special to him, and she's also like a lot more outgoing, but he's very structured and rigorous in what he does. So they just don't like each other, and they don't have a good relationship, and they don't become friends at all. But when the fair starts and she becomes her character who's a barmaid and he becomes this pirate captain dude, he instantly starts playing off her character, and it's so interesting because like he's so nice to her and flirts with her while they're doing this act, but when they aren't doing this act he's arsehole to her again. So it was such a cool romance just for the fact that he didn't like her, but he liked playing around with this role in this character that he does in the fair, and it was just so much fun. And the second book is more of a like catfish situation, and then the third book in the situation is going to be like a fake dating. So the second book really wasn't my favorite, but I do know that 2 of my favorite tropes, which is hate to love and fake dating, are in this trilogy, but I just highly recommend it. It's so much fun. And next I have to talk about Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, because literally the tagline for this book is a witch and a witch hunter fall in love. Like what more do you want? Because they're clearly on opposite sides of a war here. They clearly have different ideals, different thoughts, different people, but then they're forced to marry each other because both of them kind of get caught in a compromising position that wasn't what they wanted to happen, and now he has to get over his morals of witches being bad, and she also has to get over her morals of witch hunters being bad, and it's just so good. And they grow so well as characters in this story, and I haven't read the third one, but I definitely want to very, very soon. I do have it on my magical readathon TBR, and I'm so excited. But like this is definitely the full structure of hate to love that you want, and it is just done so well. Another amazing one that I have to mention is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J Maas, and I know this means that you have to read the whole entire Throne of Glass series to get to this book, but for all those people out there that didn't want to read Tower of Dawn because they hate Chaol, I don't know what you're doing, because Chaol and Irene have such a good story, and I love it so much because he is the captain of the guard of Ardalan, and Irene's family was killed by the battles and the wars of like ages ago, so she hates Ardalan for what they've done to her family, and she's over in this like magical place, and Chaol's gone there to get healed after he has a really bad injury. And it's really cool because like they clearly don't like each other because she hates him because he's basically the face of Ireland and someone that she can hate, but then she gets to know him as a person. So this is definitely a hate to love in a really cool way, because she judged him so quickly because she didn't know him, and he judged her because she was always snapping at him and not really helping him, and it seemed like the healing was taking a really long time. But once they get to know each other, it's so good. Like I just recommend it so much. And to speak of another Sarah J Maas story, but Crescent City is another one that has a really good love story, because again Bryce and Hunt are forced to work together and they don't like each other, and he is a lot more uptight, but that's mainly because he's been enslaved for 100 years and he's an angel and he works in the police, and she doesn't like the police, so he is assigned to her to like protect her but also to like figure out this case, so he has to be around her. But Bryce is so free-spirited and out there compared to him that he just can't stand to be around her, and she can't stand to be around him because he's so uptight. But then of course they fall in love, of course. And I can't wait for the second book because I feel like there is going to be even more relationship and romance and story that's going to involve these characters, and I'm so excited for it. And it's also nice to have adult characters too that have to deal with hating each other, because like most of her characters, obviously all the Fays are like hundreds of years old, but they still feel like juvenile. Like at least in this book with Bryce, she's like 25, and then Hunt's actually a couple hundred years old, but we know with Sarah J Maas. But I definitely think that she does write relationships like this very well, where they start off hating each other and then they fall in love, and it's beautiful. Next I want to talk about Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, because I really like the idea of having this mate bond, but you hate the person that you've fallen in love with. It's so good. Because Cal is of this different species. Like, I know what it is, but I can't say the word. And they only fall in love like once in their whole lifetimes. And then Aurora's there, and she's like 200 years old, and she's been lost in space, and then she was in like cryosleep, and then they found her. And he instantly latches onto her, but he doesn't want to fall in love with her because he doesn't like her. So he's like really rude to her for most of the book, because he's trying to get these feelings to go away and to make sure she doesn't care. So then she hates him because he's being an arsehole to her. This is kind of a little bit more on Cal's side than Aurora's side, but she's also really annoyed with him most of the time, so I think it really works. So it's probably more like hate to love, slightly annoyed. Okay, next I'm going to talk about The Winter's Curse by Maria Rotowski, and I definitely think this one is a little interesting, just because obviously Aaron hates her because he's pretending to be a spy, and then she buys him, and then he's like, oh, I hate these people, and like, oh, the government sucks. So he's mainly of the opinion that she's going to be like exactly like the force of government and body that he absolutely hates, and obviously because she's technically bought him and making him do things. Kestrel, I think, just hates him because he's so difficult as a slave, but I think she also is kind of like against the monarchy and everyone sucks, and she hates that they have slaves is what I remember. This is definitely one of those stories though where it's kind of like you just lump in the person with the like oppressive state that you hate, but I still think these are always a fun story, and they always go just like really well, and I love it so much. Then we have The Wrath on the Dawn by Renee Ardier, and this is one of my absolute favorite books ever, and I definitely think this is a hate to love, because obviously with Khalid, he keeps killing a bride every day. Like he marries them and then he kills them by the morning, so obviously he hates them for what he has to do to them. But then you kind of get more information on why he has to do that later. But with Shahrazad, her best friend was taken like a month or so ago and he killed her, and she's only going in there to kill him. Even though most of the time the story is you woo the king and then you marry them and then you kill them. This way she's just married and killed. She's like, I'm getting in there and I'm doing it. So she definitely hates him until she understands him. And that's generally the main thing of hate to love, is like they just don't understand each other until something makes sense. And it's the same thing as like Pride and Prejudice is like a common hate to love story. I think it's the standard of like they don't understand each other and they can't get past their pride or their prejudice, and then they end up falling in love, and it's beautiful. But I definitely think this was a great story, but an awesome romance. I definitely want to put The Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller in this video too, because with Alosa and Ryden, I think are the characters' names, she gets captured even though that's what she wanted to happen, and then she goes into his ship and like fucks a heap of shit up, and then when she's done pretending to be a captive, she takes over and kind of ruins his whole ship and ruins all the stuff there, and then takes him back. He hates her because he's captured, and she hated him because he just seems very annoying, and she just can't do romance right now. So I definitely think for her it's a situation of I can't deal with this right now. I can't have a romance of the person that I just ruined their whole entire life. Like I can't do this, and Ryden just actually hates her. But it's just a fun romance, and these were such quick and easy reads, so I highly recommend. And lastly, I want to talk about Lux by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I definitely feel that with Katie, she just thought Damon was so annoying, and I completely understand that, because in the Lux series they also have that kind of like mate bond semi thing going on where you just feel really attached to people, but it's also the fact that Damon is an alien and he doesn't want to fall in love with a human, so he just hates that the person he falls in love with is Katie, who is a human. So he's so annoyed by that, and he just does everything in his power to just hate on her, and she's just sick of his attitude and bullshit. But then he starts to be nice to her and she's like, no, I don't like this. So it's definitely one of those like really fun ones, and this was a really like good series, really fun paranormal. Like, it's a 5-book series, but I highly do recommend giving it a go because it was just a fun time, and I love the banter between these two when they're hating on each other. It's great. Okay, so those are all of my like solid recommendations for hate to love, but I also just want to spend some time in this video talking about the one-sided enemies to lovers, because there is a lot of books that are marketed as hate to love, but they don't actually both hate each other. And with these one-sided romances, it's always the main character that hates the other person, and there's no way to say any different, because we don't have that character's POV to actually know how they're feeling. So I understand that people would still class them as hate to love, but I class them as a one-sided. And the books that I want to talk about here, I'm just going to go through very quickly. So if there's any hate to love romances that you're like, why didn't you mention that? It's because I class them as a different thing here. So Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerry Maniscalco. She's not a fan of Thomas. He's a bit too much for her. And she finds it annoying that Thomas also wants to do autopsy, but she's a woman trying to do the job and she doesn't need no man coming in. But Thomas is infatuated with her from the first moment. Like, he doesn't dislike her. He loves her and he's actively trying to pursue her. But she's like, nah, bitch, back it up, back it up. Like, I don't need to have this energy in my face right now. And they are one of my favorite couples for sure, but it's not hate to love. Akita, Feyre and Rhys. She hates him because obviously at the time she was in love with Tamlin and she thought Rhys was his villain. I even thought Rhys was a villain, but then you find out that he's not actually a bad dude and he's liked Feyre from the first moment he saw her. It's just because we were so obsessed with Tamlin that we didn't realize that Rhys is the most selfless and awesome character I think I've ever read about. I really enjoy him, but even in times when Feyre interacted with Rhys in the first book, he never hated her. He was never rude to her. He was always a nice guy. But Rhys really thinks highly of Feyre and he really admires her, so I definitely don't see any hate on his part. Another one, Shatter Me by Tahira Mafe. Juliet hates him again because Warner does all this bad shit to her, and I understand that from her side of things it does look really, really bad, but all of it was really misunderstood because Warner is obsessed with her and in love with her. And then the whole situation again with Adam coming in the story and like ruin things in the first book, it makes sense why she's irritated with him and with Adam, and because Adam's a bit controlling and really annoying. So Warner was never the bad dude. So there was no hate on Warner's part, and I just can't say that this is fully a hate to love romance because it really isn't. Another one is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. They talk about this as being a hate to love. To be honest, Eden is very curious about Maya and why she's a girl pretending to be a male tailor, and he actually helps her pretty early on, and he always gets to come to him and talk to him and he just wants to know about her. I feel like there's no hate there. Like, he's just really curious about her and he's such a lovable goofball, and I just think that there's no part of him that could be mean to anyone really because he's so nice. Another one is Red Wine Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Like, yes, Alex does have a hate-love thing with Henry and he doesn't really understand his feelings, so that's kind of why he hates on him, but Henry's been in love with him for so many years and I really appreciate that because obviously when they're together they argue, but it's like Henry's repressing a lot of stuff there about his feelings for Alex, and I definitely love that the way that they like go from hating each other and knocking over that wedding cake to then becoming really good friends and then to becoming something more. But I definitely don't think Henry has got a hating bone in his body and he's just a sweet little bean. Another one I'm going to say is Shift by Angie Hockman, and this is one that I just read, so I don't know if a lot of people have actually read this one. This one's been set up as this like horrible work rivalry, but it's literally just the main character Henley just hating on Graham. Like, the couple of reasons that she has for why he's such a shit person aren't even anything, and like he's just like the nicest person. Like, I honestly loved Graham's character, and I talked about Graham in my mid-year book Freakout because he is definitely one of my newest fictional crushes because he's such a nice guy. He really cared about Henley's feelings and he did a lot of stuff just to make sure that he was with her so he could help her, even though she's sitting there like, oh, he's such an asshole, but like literally you vomited on him and then he didn't even blink an eye and he was so nice about it and didn't even bring it up again. But she's like, oh, he must have an agenda, and I'm like, no, he's just a nice dude, and you don't find guys like that very often, girl. And I also want to talk about The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. So this is another one where I was talking about, you know, she has to seduce the king and then marry them and then kill them and take their throne, even though Wrath in the Dawn didn't go that far. But Alessandra just hates him as well because she just wants to take the power and wants to be the queen, and he just loves her from the second he sees her. Like, he thought she was really, really cool, and even though the king vowed to never marry anyone, he just really liked her and liked hanging out with her. And even though they tried to force this love triangle in the story, which I was like, no thank you, I do not like this, I definitely think that he's just found his match in her and he's just kind of like biding his time until they can just be like really, really in love. And the last segment of my video is two couples that I want to talk about that are just toxic AF and I hate them. These are hate to love romances that I don't fucking understand because it's just so dumb. And of course the first one is Opal and Devon from Spyglass, because what the fuck is that? Like, seriously, He causes so much actual physical and emotional pain to her, and he does so many awful things, and I just can't believe some of the stuff he does to her and how he pretends to be someone else and then sleeps with her, and I just can't do that. Like, I can't actually deal with any of the shit that happens to this. And just because he fell in love, he becomes a good person when he's literally tortured the main character, like physically hurt her. And I just think this is so toxic. Like, I don't understand how that they end up happily in love, and then in the next trilogy we see them with kids. And I'm like, how did you have kids with this guy? He is a toxic person, and I just don't think it's a good idea. Like, I really don't. And the other one is Jude and Carden from The Cool Prince. Like, how does anyone think it's okay that you just fall in love after you bully the shit out of someone and just treat them like shit because they're human, but then he has to be like, oh, why do I like feel romance and attraction to you, girl? Like, why do I feel things? And I'm like, dude, you need to go to like a therapist because there's issues in your life. Jude could have any person. She could even just go to the human world and live a normal life, but she has to be dumb because she wants the crown. And I just don't understand why of all people she has to choose Carden, who again treats her like shit. Like, is this a book about how if a boy treats you like shit it means they like you? Because no. It's just toxic and I hate it. And yes, I've only read the first book and I know the second one is meant to get all stimmer, but I don't care. I don't want to know. So guys, that is all for today's recommendations video, and I do hope you enjoyed. And I just knew I had to talk about some different class of recommendations here because I'm actually really intrigued what's going to be on everyone's 7 on Sunday. I really want to know what other romances everyone's got for hate to love, and I think it's just a really good topic. And definitely, as I said, it's one of my favorite tropes, so this was just a really fun time. But anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!